I'll start. I'm Lisa Schoyer, president of the RASopa Network. Just as a quickie hi. And I had a child with Costello syndrome. Do you want to go next,
I'll
Lisa?
say hello.
I'll go next. I'm Michelle. I'm 40 years old. I live in London and I have Noonan syndrome. And I'm an advocate advisor for the RASopa Network. And I'll be speaking in a few minutes.
Hi, Beth Stronach here. I'm going to talk in a few minutes too. Welcome.
I'm Lisa Shell. I'm going to talk in a few minutes too.
I'm Lee Johnson. I'm Lisa's husband and Quinn's and Turner's dad.
All right, well, everybody, thank you so much for coming on a Saturday, and some from the evening and some from the afternoon. Next slide. This is our first Zoom, so we're very excited about doing this. So for housekeeping, we do have the chat feature that helps us, as we've already learned, to communicate with us as we move along, and also to capture it. So we'll also be keeping track of your questions that way. We're going to try to stay on time. So after each section, you can ask some questions. And if we need to keep on going, we will keep those questions, and Lee's going to review them for us to address at the end. And then, of course, additional questions we hope for conversation at the end. All right, next. So here I am with my neurotypical daughter, Turner, and there's Quinn, who's just become the big brother when she was very little, and that was 20 years ago. Next slide. So Quinn was born in 1995, and he died in 2002 of cancer related to Costello syndrome. And in the process, I ran into the family support groups, starting with what Colin Stone set up as an IT at Manchester University, way back in the dark ages where the screens were black and the text was white. Anyway, it was really a fantastic way for us to reach out across the world because we were so rare, and to learn from each other. And in the late 90s, the Costello families went from being a support group listserv to becoming organizations. So the Costello Syndrome Family Network was organized, and we were able to learn from each other. And I think you already know this from what's going on now with Facebook. But early on back then, it was really important for families to talk with each other, not just to support, but also to educate researchers on the things we were seeing. And Michelle's going to talk more about how we were able to learn from each other, and then how even just Noonan syndrome and CFC syndrome changed, and Costello too, the definition, because of the information that we were able to share with each other and then with them. Mm-hmm. I'm also part of Colin Stone's International Costello Syndrome Support Group. I'm a lifetime trustee. And so that helps me stay in touch with all the international families with Costello as well. In 2005, it was a really exciting year. And it was, with all of us talking with each other and staying in touch with all our researchers in Costello syndrome. In September, Dr. Aoki and her researchers in Japan were looking for another Noonan syndrome gene. And she used a group of children with clinical Costello syndrome as a control group to look for the Noonan gene. And by accident, or whatever happened, she found that HRAS was the Costello gene. So that was great luck. And then a month later, because an organization called the Genetic Alliance had just started their fellowship with the American Society of Human Genetics, where they brought parent leaders in to communicate with the researchers, I was able to be one of the first fellows, and I brought in a mom, Dawn McCready Santos, at the last minute. I was so glad she was able to come, mother of Marcella, who has Costello syndrome. Dawn has microbiology experience. So when we heard Francis Collins's keynote for that huge and big scientific meeting about progeria and finding a drug that could dial down the messaging for progeria and where it worked on a pathway, Dawn kept poking me and saying, Lisa, where it works is HRAS, and that's us. It's like, okay. So then we were able to go to the exhibit hall and to the American Journal of Medical Genetics booth. And we said, hey, we're the families. And they gave us 5 copies each of the publications, said, go forth, thank you so much. So we went back and we went to Francis Collins and said, hey, do you think we can learn from what you're doing? And Don was able to open the page up and show it. And he said, I think so. So then we ran to our researchers who were at the meeting. We said, you wouldn't believe it. We're talking to Francis Collins and all this stuff. And they're going, whoa, you guys. We hardly understand what this means anyway. So there we were already. And then we had to be patient about, waiting for the researchers to catch up with what we had just connected. And with Kate Rowan, we made a very strong relationship in 2007. And then soon after, with the Noonan gene find in 2001, the PTPN11, with the Costello gene find in 2005, and then with a CFC gene find in 2006, Kate Rowan was able to tie all those pieces together and recognize the pathway. So then she developed the first international RASopathy symposium, and she also encouraged us from just even the Costello one from 2007, where the families and the researchers came together, to do it with all the syndromes. And it's like, I had no idea, Noonan, NF1 and everything. And we got all our family organizations together with that symposium in Berkeley, and it was really quite exciting. So that was the beginning of these biannual conferences that we hold, so then also at that conference, the family organizations and the researchers said, this is really important, but we all have our individual interests. And so we need someone to bring it all together. And they said, Lisa, let's volunteer you to start an organization to keep us on focused. So I started the RASopathies Network, and thank goodness for the people we have on our board. Thank you very much. And here we are. Okay, next slide. So here's a a chart of the RASopathies, the famous pathway where the information comes from outside, the RTK signaling, and it goes bouncing through. I like to imagine the game Mousetrap, where one thing makes something trip and makes something go and everything. And also puts a face to what gene is connected to which kids. So as we go around, and a key part of the whole pathway is this GTP and GDP, because that's where the big gate is, a major gate. And that's also how CFC and some Noonan mutations are affected further downstream. So the idea is that if we think about the syndromes this way, we can actually think of interventions that can slow the signaling. We don't want it to stop. Cancer researchers have been doing this for a long time. They want it to stop because they want the tumor to stop, but we want our kids to be able to get some of the information because it's important. Let's see. We have some numbers here about the ratio of the prevalence and some of the features. You can see how we're all kind of little families and we're all cousins together. So any questions before we move to the next slide? We also have a video on how this works that's probably makes more sense. Okay, so next slide then. And now I'd like to introduce you to Michelle Ellis, our advocacy advisor we're so fortunate to have. Michelle.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Lisa. And I'm honored to be part of such a wonderful organization. Next slide, please. So who am I and how did I get to work for the RASopathies Network? So I've just turned 40 this year and was diagnosed with Noonan's at the age of 17. I was born and raised in Brussels, Belgium, but now live in the UK. I have had and have many of the Noonan features and associated conditions. And I've lost count the amount of surgeries I've had, well over 30. I first got involved in helping others with Noonan's because I was absolutely determined that the younger generation wouldn't feel and suffer the way I did growing up. I felt alone. I felt that feeling of being different, not having a clue that there were others like me, my brothers and sisters with Noonan's or cousins with the other RASopathies. And yeah, I just have that real drive really from pretty much very soon after the diagnosis. I found our support group, whom I worked with for about 15 years. It was called the Noonan Syndrome Support Group, starting our UK chapter in the latter years. I was one of the founding members of the RASopathies network here in the UK, and then we joined forces and we became one with the US chapter. I attended my first Noonan stroke CFC symposium, which was the first one in 2006. And then we all joined together under the umbrella of RASopathies in 2009, as Lisa Schoyer has previously talked about. And I started presenting at our advocate session in 2015, along with helping other aspects of putting on such a meeting. And in 2019, I chaired our advocate panel for the first time at our symposium in Maryland. Next slide, please. So why is it important for families to participate? Well, the main thing is, I feel very, very strongly about the importance of facilitating and encouraging the scientific community and patient support groups to work together. I feel that's the only way to move forward. It's only together that we can further our understanding of the RASopathies and develop possible treatments. So often, and this is a really big bugbear of mine, so often clinicians see the patient, the diagnosis, and not the person behind the diagnosis. And I find that putting the humanity into the diagnosis really helps those clinicians have a better drive to increase that knowledge and to help us. I've been witness so many times to a group of parents or affected individuals helping a researcher learn about a previously unreported associated feature at one of our family meetings or symposia. I mean, it's a gold mine just for both sides of the coin, you know, for the families and for the researchers. I once had one of our researchers say to me that they learn just as much as we learn from them, you know, at these meetings. So it's really important. And I think it's also vital that to understand that we are an important resource that can and want to be tapped. You know, so many of us are very happy to help with research, and the more the merrier. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's available for our families at our symposia? Well, we provide various options and activities. Of course, you can attend the main scientific sessions. Some do, some don't, some dip in, some dip out. We organize poster session, sort of a poster dessert social, where the research posters and posters for those affected. So you can see some of the you can see a couple of photos of our family posters. I think that we did last year or the year before, the time before. So it's a way for the researchers to learn more about our families. Yeah, another way for scientists to learn more about those living with the condition. Social time, well, during meals, at the end of the day, to have the opportunity to meet and speak to the researchers in a more relaxed atmosphere is actually really useful. And for the families, of course, to socialize between themselves. And then at the end of each symposium, we have a researcher whose special interest is in this, you know, let's say Noonan syndrome or CFC, any of the RASopathies. And in layman's terms, they'll basically recap the symposium, because it is quite scientific, and to hear you know, to hear it in layman's terms, our families really find that very, very beneficial. And of course, with a Q&A session at the end of it as well, which yeah, also very beneficial. Next slide, please. So what's been learned? with our symposium has led to many new gene discoveries. It enables scientists to share cutting edge research. It's helped encourage other researchers studying the RAS cellular pathway, e.g. oncogeneticists, to think about RASopathy syndromes in their research studies. And it's led to a longitudinal natural history study, which will be explained by Beth a little later. Next slide. And I think I'm going to ask if there are any questions. Lee is the person manning the questions.
Yep, we have no questions yet.
Okay.
So,
Yes, sorry, I haven't done my last slide. I apologize. So I forgot this when we practiced earlier. So our next RASopathy symposium is next year, July 23rd to the 25th. In Denver, Colorado, and we would love to have you there. If you want any information, please contact us through the official, through Facebook or whatever, our emails, website. And yeah, we would absolutely be an honor for you to be there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next up is Lisa Schill, and just to keep everybody up on the questions, there haven't been any. So okay. Lisa Schill, you're up.
Thank you. So I'm the vice president of the RASopathies. I became involved with the RASopathies network after my son Max was diagnosed with a PTPN11 mutation. I wanted to make sure research was being conducted, and I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted our family to be a part of it. And there weren't a lot of research studies that were being funded by patient advocacy organizations. So for me, that was really important. So I found Lisa Schoyer and got involved many years ago. And one of the things that has been a passion for me is the $10 million bike ride. The University of Pennsylvania 7 years ago started doing the $1 million bike ride. So it's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the university started an orphan disease center. So it's a center that focuses on rare diseases, and all of the RASopathies are considered rare diseases. And one of the philanthropists there was very upset that research is done in silos, that it's really difficult for these small organizations to raise funds for research. So they cover all the costs of running a fundraiser. They cover all the costs of running the bike ride, and whatever we raise in the bike ride, if you're chosen, sorry, just wait, I gotta admit someone. If you're chosen as one of the teams, one of the rare disease teams, and we have been for the 7 years, all those costs are covered, and whatever money we raise goes directly towards a research grant. And that research grant could be for anything that the RASopathies network decides is necessary. We write the grant stipulations, and the money is matched by the University of Pennsylvania, and it's also matched by us. We match a certain portion of it. So if you donate to our organization and earmark a $1 million bike ride, we will match that amount up to a certain dollar amount. In the past few years, it's been 10,000, and then Penn will match that money up to 25,000. So it's a really great way to keep research moving. And we've had a lot of families. Here's some pictures of the water stop with some families volunteering. So it's like a party, I say, because it's not on the side of the road. We have the best water stop that's kind of up a hill where we can hang out, and then the bike riders. And so what has it funded? So over the last 7 years, we've had over $400,000 towards research grants that have been gone all over the world. You can participate in the bike ride if you live in another country, if you're local. And we at the scientific symposiums will talk about this research. We invite all these people to come. So this year we're inviting Gregor Andelfinger to come. We just sent out the invitation. So hopefully he'll accept to talk about the inhibition that he's using, inhibitor that he's using for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. There's a picture of Bruce Gelb here, who was awarded the funds in the past, who spoke at the RASopa Symposium. There's also been papers that have been published on this research. And if you're interested in any of it, contact me and I can guide you to the right place, or you can look on our website. But we've tried to pick things that we've heard the community talking about. So there's, you know, a lot of people talking about gastrointestinal issues. So that's why that was one of our first ones. About pain, that nobody was looking at pain. This year we raised $65,000. It's going to go to study, you know, adults with RASopathies, because there isn't a lot of research going there. And some years we keep it open because, you know, we never know what research is out there, and there might be some new cutting edge research that we really want to support. So how can you help? If you live near, or even if you don't and you want to travel to Philadelphia, of course not during a pandemic, but you can ride in Philadelphia, you can volunteer at the water stop, you can ride virtually. You can create a giving page, and this is something I'd have to walk you through so we can make sure the funds are being allocated to our RASopathies team, but you can create a page like this. This is a little boy, Shane. His parents participate every year and have gotten a lot of other people, he has CFC, a lot of other people to ride in the bike ride. They all come down from Vermont and have raised a lot of money for the bike ride. And if anyone wants to create a giving page, you can help, and you can help spread the word. So the bike ride's always usually in May or June of every year. And we usually start probably in January or February, starting to get the giving pages together and spreading the word. So if anyone ever wants to be involved with that, please, this is lschill@rasopathiesnet.org. We'd love to have you. And I also wanted to talk about, because, you know, one of our missions is to connect, collaborate, and cure. So we work with all types of organizations, all the other RASopathies organizations, and then also other umbrella organizations. And I just wanted to share this with you because I think it's really important that rare disease patients are supported. And there's this new rare scholarship that's funded by the Every Life Foundation. And they're $5,000 scholarships for rare disease patients. And RASopathies are considered rare, so we're all included in this. And this is for USA only, unfortunately. Residents 17 and older. There are 32 awards that will be granted, and this isn't just for college. This is if your child wants to take an art class, if your child wants to take a photography class, or if your child wants to take a graduate school level class, these funds will go to that. So the deadline to apply is coming, you know, August 28th, and the scholarship recipients will be notified in October. And to learn more, the website's at the bottom. You can also go to the Every Life Foundation's website to learn more. And now I'd like to, oh wait, is there any questions?
None have come in, so
okay.
On to the
so
next.
We'll move on. So now I'd love to introduce Beth. Not only is she a PhD, she's our secretary, but not only our secretary, she just does an amazing amount of work for our organization.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you everybody else for joining. My name is Beth Stronach. I am a board member and a secretary for the organization, and I have a couple pictures here, my husband and my son, Sam. Sam is the member of our family that has a RASopathy. He has Noonan syndrome and a PTPN11 mutation. And he's the reason why I got involved with this organization. Could I have the next slide? So I am a scientist by training. I actually used to study tissue closure in fruit flies. And so you're actually looking at a little tiny fruit fly embryo. And I used to give seminars on this in the past, so I won't do that today. But needless to say, I have a background and an interest in developmental biology and genetics. And so as a faculty member, I had my child and I found out that he had a rare genetic disorder, and it was quite striking because it related to the pathways, the signaling pathways that we studied that actually control this same process in the flies. So next slide, please. So I was interested in using the background that I have in academia and in science to help promote knowledge and awareness about the RASopathies, and to try to bridge the populations, the clinicians and the researchers, as well as the families, because I can come at it from both perspectives. So my roles in the organization, I met up with Lisa Schill when she was at a conference in Pittsburgh and brought her over to my house, and she met Sam, and they welcomed me into the RASopathies network. So I helped to co-organize this symposia, and that's like what we're involved in right now. So we've come up with our schedule of speakers, and we're starting to invite them, and hopefully we'll be able to do this in person, but of course we'll have a contingency if we need to for going virtual. Also, I write content for the website or for the newsletters that you might be receiving by email or Gmail. And for the grant applications, I help to write those. We write for NIH funding to support the conferences that we put on. And I also try to do my best to curate research opportunities and research studies that come out in the literature, and to pass those on through our various social media platforms along with Elizabeth. I actually am the one that tweets for RASnet, so if you want to join the Twitter, follow us on Twitter, it's at RASopathiesNet. And I post studies there, I post, I don't know, announcements, newsletters, links to various things, etc. The last thing here, I advocate for RASopathies research and treatments by also participating in going to meetings, and I've listed just a few here. So Lisa Schill and I went to Rare Disease Day at the NIH a couple of years ago, and ended up talking to our lawmakers, policymakers, which is another important thing that we strive to keep on top of. I'm going to be attending the second RAS targeted drug discovery or drug development meeting, which is convening industry and pharma professionals. So we hope to raise awareness among those groups of people to make sure RASopathies is on their radar screen. So there are a lot of potential treatments that are being studied for RAS cancers, and we want to be able to make sure that those researchers and pharma individuals know that the RASopathies are out there, and that those drugs might also be able to help our loved ones and our population. So I'm going to go raise awareness at that meeting, and then also at the RAS Initiative Symposium, which is a program that's run through the National Cancer Institute. Okay, next slide. So I just wanted to use this slide to bring up a few research opportunities that are ongoing right now. And I can first pose the question of why you should participate in research, or why you might want to. And we can think of many things, I'm sure, but for one, I think it's an empowering thing, and it's a way, it's important to have the voice of the individuals that are affected to guide the research and guide the trials that we hope to be participating in the future. And I'm sure you can think of your own reasons why you might want to participate in research. We're gearing up right now in collaboration with the NIH and the National Cancer Institute through this program called Advancing RASopathies Therapies, or the ART project. This is going to be a longitudinal study that's going to be centered at the Clinical Center at NIH in Bethesda. And basically, we're going to try to get a natural history study together that's a large, long-term study of the disorders. And so we'll be reaching out to you in the near future to try to enroll you into this study. And it's basically a way to monitor how the disorders affect people and change over the developmental age groups. So infants and toddlers and children and adolescents and adults. And the hope is to find endpoints or find ways that we can measure things so that when we are testing treatments, that we'll have a way to see if they're being successful or not. Another study that's going on right now, not necessarily for the RASopathies, but for anybody that is dealing with the pandemic right now. It's a COVID study to see how rare disease patients are dealing with the pandemic, both in terms of their physical health, their mental health, or access to care. So if you're interested in that study, you can link to that on our website or at the National Institutes of Health. And also the EverLife Foundation is conducting a national rare disease burden study. Again, not specific to the RASopathies, but if you are in the rare disease community and you want to complete a survey about the direct and indirect costs of living with a rare disease, even the non-medical burdens, then they will be compiling the information from that study. And I think I'll stop there. Is there any questions on this part?
There have not been any sent in.
Okay. Let me introduce Lee. Lee's going to be the next speaker, and he's the treasurer of our group. Sorry, Lee.
Great, no problem. Okay, I'm Lee Johnson. I'm Lisa's spouse, and there's another picture of Quinn and Turner there as well. So next chart. Okay, one of the things that we do at the network is that we run a contact registry, and this is an important way to get information and connections between families and researchers. And it's a simple concept, and it might not be what you think it is. Let's just kind of read through and make sure that it is what it is. It's actually a way for you families to learn more about research studies that you might want to join in with. So you provide us just a little bit of information, basically how we can reach out to you and a few other little factoids. That information that you send us, we never share outside the network. We never share outside our organization. And we use this information. What we do is we learn about research studies from time to time, and we refer you to the researchers if you want to decide that you want to be a part of a research study. So we provide their contact information to you if we think it's a good fit. Mm-hmm. So that's basically it. The next chart, this is the list of information that we get. So we care about the name and the birth year and so forth, the contact info for the affected person. The only sort of medically related information that we gather is the diagnosis, the gene mutation, if known, and if the affected person has passed away, as Quinn has, we need to know the date and the cause of death. We also know that from other contact registries, we know that caregiver information is very important. So name, relationship, and it can be a parent or a friend or another caregiver. And then contact information for that person. And the reason we give 2 here is because we definitely don't want to lose you once we have you. And we have found that having that second caregiver, could be a friend, could be a relation, is frequently a key to not losing track of you if the family moves or something like that. So our contact information, our email there is down at the bottom, and feel free to reach out to us if you would like to join the registry. And that, I believe, is it for me. I don't see any questions. And up next is Elizabeth Parker.
Hey everyone, glad that you're here. I got involved with the RASopathies network. I think Ezra was about 2. So Ezra was diagnosed with juvenile myelomonocytic leukemia at 4 months old, and that led way to his Noonan syndrome PTPN11 diagnosis at 6 months. I've always been, since that, fascinated with the connection between the RASopathies and certain cancers. And so that's one reason why I love supporting RASopathies research and this organization. So for the RASopathies Network, I'm a member at large. I specialize in social media outreach, and I have a little bit of a background in graphic design. So some of the things that you see maybe poorly made here, graphics, those are me. I have tried to use my unique skill set to offer my volunteer services in that way. Next slide, please. I also use my yoga teaching to create fundraisers. So I'll get to that in a second. One of the ways that I have loved kind of taking this on as a new purpose for my life is connecting with other RASopathies families. I do that a lot on Instagram. There's kind of like a new generation, younger generation of moms who maybe don't use Facebook and they use Instagram. And so I like connecting with them on there and encouraging them with their new diagnoses and connecting them to information via the RASopathies network. So for me, advancing RASopathies research has looked like a lot of fundraising. I found out early on that sharing our story was a great way to leverage a personal investment in our story, in Ezra, and then eventually into donations that would lead to funding research. So I encourage everybody to do that as well. There's a personal preference on how much you want to share, but I found that sharing those personal stories is something that really lends to people becoming personally invested in research. One of the things that I like to do, like I mentioned, is teach yoga. I'm a yoga teacher, and so for the past 5 or 6 years, I've done an annual family yoga class that's all donation-based, and during the class, we do yoga, but I also teach a little bit about the RASopathies and Noonan syndrome and rare disease. There's other ways that you can create your own fundraisers. There's so many gifts that you have that no one else has, and you can turn those into a fundraiser. We've sold cookies. We've done the yoga. I've taught a yoga and beer class at a local brewery. There's just a million ways that you can use your unique talents to create a fundraiser. You have the opportunity every November and December. This year it's December to support Giving Tuesday. That's a campaign through Facebook. You can make your own giving campaign on there. It's as simple as clicking the prompt to add a donation button. And so those funds will go directly to the RASopathies network, and we will use that money to support research. Also on Instagram, like I've mentioned, there's a really cool feature on Instagram as well in your stories to add a donation button there. And again, all of those funds come directly to us. And since we're a nonprofit organization, there's no added fees on those donations. As Lisa Schill mentioned, there's $1 million bike ride. Our family had the privilege to participate this year since it was virtual, and we had a great time doing that. And it's an easy way for us to ask for donations. And it's something that we enjoy doing as a family. And so we'll continue to do that in the future. Besides creating fundraisers, you guys have the opportunity to participate in research studies. We always post those on our website and on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter as well. And then also just helping us spread the word. So recruiting for the registry that we've talked about, the contact registry, it really kind of just takes like a little brief explanation of what that information is useful for, and then reaching out to your friends in the community and encouraging them to send us an email with that information. Sometimes, this is a little bit over our heads, the scientific aspect. And so if you could help us spread the word by sharing with your community that we need this information and that it will help them, that would be appreciated. Let's see, what else? So get involved in our organization. Like I mentioned, I have like a very amateur background in graphic design. That's something that I can volunteer and share with the RASopathies network. And if you have a special skill, that's something that you could volunteer as well, and it would be very appreciated. Thanks.
So let me go through the questions. How would you like RASnet to help you? We really need your input to build our pathway forward, because it has to be relevant to the people we serve. What would you like to see, and how can we improve? So Rob has a son with PTPN11. The location has his care team believing it's multiple lentiginase, and he's downregulating the MEK pathway and upregulating the mTOR pathway. He's taking everolimus for the mTOR pathway. Is anyone aware of more options in treatment, or if there's any testing we should have to identify the affected pathway other than assuming based on similar mutations? So that's
Actually, I could share something about that. I think there is a new publication that's out that describes efforts to find new targets for both Noonan and NSML. And I think they might have found candidates. These are mouse studies so far, but they've done a new approach towards screening to be able to identify candidates that would affect one or both of the pathways. And I can't think of any, I don't know of any other trials or treatments right now for NSML, but Amy Roberts, I think, is one of the people who is a chair of our symposia that's coming up next summer, and I think she's been working on some of our clinicians that we network with are working on or are working with individuals that have that diagnosis. So, not sure.
And we can also.
If I may, you may be, I don't know if this is the same paper you're talking about, but you may be talking about Anton Bennett's paper from Yale. He's looking at he's the one that's developed the mouse models for NS and NS with multiple lentiginase. And that's actually the work that our company is based upon. So actually, we're actually taking that work and actually pushing that through phase 2. Actually, and we're about to start a phase 2 trial on that specific type of work based upon the mouse models.
Yes, Anton came and talked about that last time. So
Yeah.
This is very rapid. Thank you. This is exciting. So stay tuned. Would you like to have meetings about what we're learning as we go? We can also do advocacy strands. I think one of the things we know is that to be a good advocate, we need to have been educated so that we can be ready to talk, not just about our concerns, but also in the context of the situation, so that we can move and the people involved to recognize what we have to share. Mm-hmm. So there are resources to provide that way that we can plug you into, or even make our own tailored trainings for that if we have enough interest. Okay.
Let me just break in briefly and indicate, if Jeff hasn't seen it, that Rob would like a little bit of contact information from you. If there's a way that we can connect you, you can just email us, and then we can put you guys together if you like.
Absolutely, sure.
I think one strand we were thinking of trying to follow up on in the future is related to potential treatments or things that are in the pipeline. People might be hearing about various types of therapy, gene therapy, RNA therapy, gene editing, small molecules, and we would like to learn more about these various modes, various types of therapies ourselves, and we plan to try to touch on that at the symposium as well. But perhaps in advance of that, we could, if people seem to be interested, we could try to do a little meeting like this about those various modalities, and maybe get some experts to talk about that, or just describe what various companies have in the pipelines, what might be happening for our group in the future.
That would be great. if I could jump in here for a second, I introduced myself in the beginning. I'll reintroduce myself. I am the parent of an adult child. She's 22 years old, and she was diagnosed with Noonan syndrome at the age of 2. At that time, it was a clinical diagnosis. They were unable to provide, we were followed by a geneticist annually, and then just kind of dropped off as she entered into her teens. It was just more of an intake from them, an intake and intake. And they didn't really urge us to, return. And we did see her geneticist about 2 years ago, the same one that diagnosed her at the age of 2. So it's kind of nice that we had that continuity. So we saw her 2 years ago, and she was able to submit a test in. And it turns out my daughter with Noonan syndrome has a very rare form of Noonan syndrome. And I think it's BRAF. But it's very rare. And I said, well, now that we know that, I kind of giggled. I thought, well, what do we do with this information? How will this impact her now that we know this? Is there anything we should be prepared for? And all those various questions. The answer was not really. The topic of, of course, I looked it up online. And there was what caught my attention, which was alarming, there was mention of cancer. But when I asked her about that with my follow-up questions, she had said that this is such a rare form that there's really not enough known about the individuals with this form of Noonan syndrome to even make a determination if she's got some increased risk factor for cancer in addition to what the general population might have. So that's really what I learned at that point. I am very interested in gene studies. I attended the Noonan syndrome conference in Chicago 9 years ago. And it was good for me to go. I loved it. I attended partially with my daughter, but mostly alone, and I was fascinated with the science. But one thing that was challenging for me to process is I saw all the people with Noonan syndrome, and there were so many that had a higher sort of functioning level than my daughter. They were all chit-chatting in groups and communicative. My daughter has a significant intellectual disability. I would describe it as perhaps on this teetering on severe, moderate to severe, and she has a major language disorder. So she uses an iPad with a speech thing on there, and she's able to use that very well. But she's severely affected with communication. Her receptive understanding is much better than her her expressive. But that's been our challenge. So something that's been interesting to me is how can I'd like to help the population if what she has is so rare. I'd like to participate in any studies with her and whatnot. But I'm very interested in what's going on with study with genes, because it was mentioned at that time, and for goodness sake, that was 9 years ago. So that's where I am right now. So I need to reconnect with our community, and find out if we can be of help, and then learn much more.
So let me slip in here. The BRAF, if you go back, Lisa, can you go back to the slide of the RASopathies? BRAF is also showing up among individuals clinically diagnosed with CFC syndrome. So that's interesting that and so that's sort of another explanation of why it, might be somewhere in between, and you might find some resources and support by joining the CFC community as well.
Yeah. I think BRAF is one of the main CFC genes, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, then thank you for sharing that. What was described to me just a couple 2-3 years ago was rare. It was rarely rare. Like
Noonan syndrome. So some. I'm not a scientist, but there has been a discussion over the years. We've had a couple of other Noonan people who have tested positive with the BRAF gene. Some scientists believe if it's BRAF, it's definitely CFC. Some other scientists and doctors believe that you can have BRAF and have Noonan syndrome. It also depends what allele, I think, as well. So what the exact mutation is. But there is a definite school of thought that BRAF can be associated with Noonan syndrome, although there is discussion whether within the scientific community, from what I understand. Yeah.
I think it kind of gets confusing because there's that, clinical diagnosis, and then there's a molecular diagnosis. And, years ago, they didn't know the genes. So, and even with Noonan now, I feel like they find a new mutation and they're just like, oh, it's Noonan syndrome. They just drop it in there. And you can see, like you're saying, that how people are affected are so vastly different, even with the same mutation. So, and that's why I think it's one of the reasons why it's so important to bring all the RASopathies together, because I think you can find a lot of resources, with CFC or Costello and Noonan. I think we all need to help each other, because we're all, even if we have the same exact mutation, or even if we have one's Noonan, one Costello, we all have similar problems, but we all don't have the same problems. So I think it's, it would be good for you to reach out to the other groups. And if you're in the RASopathies family Facebook group on Facebook, if you're on there, RASopathies family is not associated with any organizations, but they're a fabulous wealth of information and resources.
Yeah.
And same with, and then the advocacy organizations as well, the CFC International and the Costello group as well.
So on Facebook, it's called RASopathies Family. That's the group I should search.
Yeah, and then in brackets, it'll say formerly Noonan syndrome family. So it'll be a really long title. And I think there's about 3,000 people on there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
3,000.
And it's only for families. So you'll have to be, they'll ask you to join, but you have to be approved to come in, because we don't let researchers in or companies in. It's just a place for families to discuss information, but I find that very helpful. And it's funny because it's the same thing. The woman who started it years ago got a diagnosis of Noonan syndrome, but then when she had the molecular diagnosis, she ended up becoming CFC. So that's why it was the Noonan syndrome group, and then they switched it to RASopathies.
Well, when I went to the conference 9 years ago in Chicago, all three groups were in attendance, so we were commingling and whatnot. I really, again, I feel, I've always felt that she fit the Noonan syndrome, definition, because she has so many of the characteristics. And even 2 years ago, the geneticist said she is definitely still Noonan syndrome, but she has this very rare form. And she didn't mention CFC, because if she did, my ears would have been really perked up. And the geneticist she's really a good geneticist. I mean, I live in an urban area where, so I'll have to look further into it, but I'll absolutely join the family Facebook group and see if I can learn a little more, describe myself, my daughter, and see if anyone can jump in there. But I kind of walked out of her office after the summary of the report and the findings, and I was like, oh my God, I just kind of laughed. I'm like, does this change anything for us? No, it doesn't. Yeah. We're just going to carry on.
Yeah.
But I just put it to bed because I don't think there was anything I could really do with it. But I'd like to be a part of the community as it moves forward, in terms of contributing and learning, and potentially helping my daughter, or certainly helping other people.
Yeah, and I think that once we get this, it's taking a little longer than we hoped, but once we get this longitudinal study started with the National Cancer Institute, even though it has the name cancer, it's asking about all sorts of symptoms. And we worked really hard to sit down with the researchers to be like, look, these are all the parts of the body that are affected by the syndromes. We have people who can answer these questions, people who are nonverbal and might need help. So they've taken all that information into consideration when coming up with the questions, and we're just waiting for it to be approved. And once it is, we can start reaching out to everyone. It's going to start with a survey, and we need a lot of people to do the survey, and it's a really long survey, but doing the survey, and then once they do the surveys, they'll pick a certain group to come to the NIH Clinical Center. But we really need to get all these, everyone involved with that, so we can really see the diversity, and you can learn more, like what is the cancer risk, or what is the risk of seizures, or what is the risk of, you know, losing your hearing, or we don't have any of those answers right now. And we're really hoping that this longitudinal study will help, but we need a lot of families to be involved and participate. So thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm
thank
thrilled
you.
to be here.
Thank you.
And Christine, I wanted to, I have two family situations where actually the families themselves, despite very good geneticists, got a re-diagnosis. One of them was a child with Costello, who had Costello from one of the top geneticists, the guy who started the David Smith meetings for Costello. And I kept saying, that just doesn't look right. Are you sure? You know, and it was really tough, and everyone said no, no. And then molecularly, it was CFC. It was definitely not HRAS. And she had different challenges. I mean, they were close, but not the same. And then a mom of a child with Noonan syndrome, the child got cancer. And so she continued to do research, and she said, you know, all these issues that my son has, it's mild, but it's more like Costello. Can you do a genetic test? And turned out the child with Noonan from a major city cancer center got re-diagnosed with Costello syndrome. And unfortunately, he did die from the cancer. In terms of cancer research, what we're seeing now is that generally speaking, in terms of with a population, Costello has the highest risk, as does NF1, because you know that's all their various tumors, benign and not. It's unusual to see CFC get mutations, even though their mutation is closer to the nucleus. So there was a suggestion that would make them likely to be higher at risk, but it hasn't seen it that way. With Noonan, we have seen, as with Ezra, that there's a higher risk of certain cancers. They don't perform the same way as they do among the typical population.
Right.
So that's, as we know, and with Costello, it's the same gene, but it's where the mutation is on the gene.
Mm-hmm.
We've noticed like G12S is the most common, 80%, and it's huge range from very mildly affected to very severely affected. We thought maybe that would be the one where they have higher risk of cancer or not, or more developmental disabilities, and it's all over the place. We did notice that two smaller and rarer ones, we weren't sure about, I think it was G12A, I can't remember if it was 12A or 13A. There were like 4 or 5 kids, and 2 of them had cancer. So that's a pretty high ratio, but it's only 4 kids. So that's where, right? So this is where we need more families to learn more from the families. And as more were diagnosed with that mutation, it did seem to prove that specific mutation did seem to have a higher risk. So this is that, you know, when you're alone, not enough people to know, and you're looking for more people to come in. So that's the path that we've been going and learning and seeing in reality how where we're really rare, the way we find out more is to join up with other people and help. And you know, going back to the clinical versus the we really understand that what really works best is what helps the family in terms of support. So if you do have, I mean, if and with this family that we weren't sure if she had CFC or Costello, the child, I said, you know, join them and see if they can help you better or not. I mean, if in terms of matching with the other issues that you have, we'll never say no to you, but you might find that you'll have a closer connection on various things. So, you know, we're not shutting you out. We're just offering other options that might fit better. And that's, I think, the philosophy that we all have for each other.
Well, we could be of help to the community because Gigi's 22, she's an adult, and we have a history. When you've got younger children participating in studies, their life hasn't happened yet. So I can speak to, I mean, I could answer a whole young lifespan worth of questions regarding therapies and surgeries, and, you know, we've history to contribute. So, yeah.
That would be great. Thank you.
Lisa, can I just?
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Christine.
I was just, you know, And I'm so grateful to hear all the work you've been doing, all of you, each one of you, from fundraising to the scientific research to collecting data and just being active in this community. I'm very grateful hearing y'all speak. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very sweet of you to say. Thank you.
I just wanted to point out to the group that there are actually a couple of, just because we're actually working in this area specifically, there's this very interesting association between cancer and developmental disease. There are two papers, there are actually two papers, two, actually here. One was published in 2013 by Bellicosa, another one 2015 by McDonald, where they actually talk about the linkage, and this is not only the biology, but the clinical overlaps between cancers, different types of cancers, and developmental illnesses. And they go through some of at that time, right, again, this is 3 or 5, 6 years ago, the different genes and basically how they present and the different cancers. Now, what's interesting about that is that the work that we're doing with Anton specifically relates to the repurposing of all currently on the shelf cancer therapeutics for developmental disease, which is something I think he presented back in the last meeting, right? So it turns out, though, that the work that he's done since then seems to imply that there's a wider base of compounds that potentially could be repurposed for these types of developmental illnesses. And so it turns out that you may not actually have to go looking to make new therapies. They may actually already be here. That because it turns out that you can lower the dose by almost like 100-fold and use very, very ultra micro amounts that are much safer than, say, the broader cancer, right, therapeutic. You actually now can actually apply these in pediatric cases. So it's potentially an amazing discovery that he's made. And again, this is what we're trying to look at as part of our company, IGF Pharmaceuticals.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've been really working on with the RASopathies network, with bringing all the cancer researchers together. That's how we ended up with this longitudinal natural history study, is because we tapped cancer researchers and we're like, hey, we know you're working on this, but we're right here too. So open your eyes a little bit wider. And it's been very beneficial for us, because I think that's you hit the nail, on the head, is trying to find therapies that are already out there, that are already proven safe, that can be used in our families. So
yeah, and going back to Francis Collins with the farnesyl transferase inhibitor, that is a targeted chemotherapy that he started to wonder for progeria, and it works right on HRAS, so exactly that. And then the FDA working to help repurpose those drugs, because otherwise we can't get any headway, because drug companies need to survive on selling drugs. So if they can repurpose an existing drug and have their patent extended for a limited amount of time, that gives us access, rare diseases, access to those drugs.
Well, can I, again, Lisa, are you aware of the voucher program that the FDA put in? Yes, so you know about that special, yeah. So we're also taking advantage of that as well, because at least, that's another promotion to get into this, particularly for pediatric rare diseases, right? Of course.
Yeah. Lots of stuff to learn if you're interested, Christina.
I am.
Are there
I shall.
Are there any other questions for now? Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next slide.
Okay.
Oh, wait, sorry. Are you okay, Michelle?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd like to say a few words. We found out this evening that our dear Dr. Noonan has passed away. I've had the pleasure of knowing her for 20 plus years, and I always laugh at how I met her. I went up to her and I sort of was very, very nervous, and I said, "Oh my gosh, you're my hero. Without you, we'd be so much in the dark." Little did I know how modest she was, and I probably embarrassed her quite a bit. She was a trailblazer. She was one of the first, if not the first, pediatric cardiologist in the States. She was a fierce advocate for our community. Was always there for whatever we needed of her, we asked of her, and more. She came to every one of our meetings. She loved our kiddos. She would spend time just chatting to them, chatting to our families. And it was just been a real honor to have worked with her, traveled with her, and to have gotten to know her over the years. And yeah, she was a very, very special lady, and she'll be missed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I'm just sad to hear that.
Yeah.
We met her. We had a chance to meet her.
Yeah, I know. I was sad. I was afraid I was going to cry if I talked about it. So I put this picture of my son. You know, you meet your the doctor who's behind it all, and you want to get that picture. And then, of course, my child is making faces in the picture. So it was just funny. I do have a nice one. I did get one smiling, but I put this in here so I laugh, remembering her rather than being sad. So.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to mention a few words. I'm very grateful. Yeah.
Well, thank you for all your time, everybody.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to try to do this more often. So look at our website. Like Beth was saying, we want to try to have some sessions on the different types of therapies out there, especially now that everyone's talking about gene therapy, and we're going to be talking about it at the symposium to sort of educate you all on it and have some special speakers and about other types of treatments, and then also on advocacy or different topics that you're interested in, just email us and we can set it up. And also if there are areas that you feel that aren't being researched enough, we'd love to hear about that too. So every year as we're working on these research grants on where to give money, we can know where we should allocate those funds. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you all.
everyone.
Thank you. So if I may ask, how, other than going on the family Facebook group, and going to the website, I follow you on Twitter. How else can I stay connected and I'll learn more? Or, is there almost if I have any questions that I feel you may be able to answer, where would I direct those?
Well, you can just send them to info@rasopathiesnet.org. We all get that that email, and then we can direct it to the right place. If it's more scientific, we might send it to Beth. If we don't feel like we can answer it, we have a scientific advisory board that includes some of the best RASopathies clinicians and researchers. So we send it to them to get an answer for you as well.
Thank you.
And you
And
also
then if it's
our online newsletter. You can register for, is it called newsletter online our online newsletter that we send out. How often do we send those out?
4 times a year.
4 times a year.
Try.
Okay. Thanks.
We're all volunteers, so sometimes it gets a little behind. And then, but any of us, if you're interested in, learning more about fundraisers, you can reach out to Elizabeth. If you want to do the bike ride, you can reach out to me if you want to get more involved with that. So just.
We're also recruiting nominations for board members. So that's always on our list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just volunteers of any stripes, whatever you think you might be able to do. And if you first reach out to the info@rasopathiesnet email, then we can individually email you back, and then you'll have our individual contacts.
Great.
And your time is worth, is just as valuable as any donation, or maybe even more valuable, because it lasts longer. So yeah, absolutely. So we'd be really grateful for any help you would like to give.
And even if it's as simple as contacting 5 other people with the syndrome and saying, hey, join the registry, so if you have 5 minutes of time, or if you want to spend hours, you can work on the newsletter, or there's different things.
You can do it.
We can pull you in.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Anyone else before we say our goodbyes? No? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you
Next time.
Take care, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.